Welcome to the YouTube edition of the Storywise podcast. This segment is just part of a full 1-hour interview which you can hear on iTunes and at Grisanticonsultancy.com.
Welcome to Storywise, the podcast designed to give you the in-depth story behind some of our top storytellers as a way to inform, motivate, and inspire you to believe that you too can make your dreams a reality. My name is Jen Grisanti. I am a story career consultant at Jen Grisanti Consultancy, Inc., a writer's consultancy designed to help you accomplish your writing goals and reach your career destination through one-on-one consults, seminars, and teleseminars. And I am absolutely honored to have with me here today as my guest for the second time, Glen Mazzara. Glen was my very first guest, and I got such tremendous feedback on his podcast, and he recently became the executive producer on The Walking Dead, a show that I know so many of you are interested in hearing about. So I invited him back to talk about The Walking Dead and what he's done since we last spoke and what he plans on doing in the future. So welcome, Glen.
Thanks for having me back.
It is a pleasure to have you back. And let me remind you Glen's background. Glen was on The Shield for 6 years. He was on Life for how many years?
Just the first year. First
year of Life, and he created Crash on Starz. And he is now, in the interim, he did Criminal Minds, Suspect
Behavior.
Behavior, the new one. He was a consulting producer.
Right, and I did Hawthorne for 2 years. I was showrunner for the second season.
Great. Well, look at you.
Thank you.
One of the busiest men in Hollywood. My gosh. You've worked consistently for how many years now?
I've had a good run. I've been working consistently since The Shield, 2001.
Wow.
When we set that show.
That is fantastic.
Thank you.
Congratulations. And what I love more than anything is hearing what a positive place you're in now. That makes me really happy.
Well, I'm happy. We're doing the second season of Walking Dead, 13 episodes for AMC. It'll be on in October. And I'm happier now than I've ever been. I'm just really excited. Frank Darabont, who obviously wrote and directed Shawshank Redemption and Green Mile, is the showrunner.
Great.
Big
fan.
Creator of the show.
Yeah.
Robert Kirkman's the creator of the comic book. He's an executive producer, fully involved.
Great.
Gail Ann Hurd, renowned producer of the Terminator.
Yeah, you got a great team over there.
And we have a fantastic writing staff.
Oh, that's great.
And it's all about the work, and we're really the material, I think, is very, very exciting. And it's the sort of stories that you can't shut off. You're really thinking a lot about it. How about this? You're tweaking the scene. It's very exciting. And I think what's been the biggest surprise about the entire experience is the way we're actually writing the show.
Right.
Which is, I think, unique to this show.
Right.
And completely different from anything I've ever been involved with.
Yeah, because you went from major network stuff to now into cable, and I know you did Crash and then this. Why don't we start with discussing what that transition is like and what the difference is between network writing and cable writing? Well,
just recently, I for a while, I wrote on The Shield. I went after that to some network shows. Then I went back to cable. I did Crash, which was obviously a premium cable. Mm-hmm. Then I went to TNT for Hawthorne. Then back to network. Now I'm back on cable on AMC. What was interesting is at one point I was doing them simultaneously. I was working on Hawthorne. I was doing post-production on the last few episodes of season 2, and I was writing a freelance episode of The Walking Dead for season 1 of Walking Dead.
Wow.
And I was writing that at night, what turned out to be their 5th episode out of 6.
Great.
So what was interesting was the early drafts of my script were very on the nose. People were saying exactly what they needed to say, exactly what they were thinking. And I got some terrific notes from the writers, not only Frank Darabont, the showrunner, but also Chick Egley, Adam Fierro, Jack LaJudas, to pull it back. And so I saw that the writing I was doing for Hawthorne had affected what I was doing for The Walking Dead. So I did a pass where I just looked at every single line and said, what is somebody saying, and how can they just say it one off? Just even dropping a word, just having somebody not finish a line, having somebody stutter, just anything.
Feel
just
the subtext. Yeah.
And that's what it was. Because then when I went to Criminal Minds Suspect Behavior, that is a show that does not allow for subtext.
Right.
And the machinery behind a lot of network dramas, particularly the executives giving notes, where they are worried about confusing the audience.
Right.
They constantly give notes to make this clearer, hit it harder, let's say it again.
Right.
Particularly at the script level. And that stuff should be broomed out in the cut, and a lot of times it doesn't get broomed out. So on that show, for example, you have Forrest Whitaker leading a team of investigators, and those people actually say things like, I hope we get this guy, or he's not going to stop until we catch him.
Right.
And that's just horrible.
Right.
That's just horrible. And what's interesting is the only people who have subtext in that show are the serial killers.
Right.
Because you really don't know what they're talking about.
You don't want to make what they're thinking obvious.
Right.
Right.
So it becomes a question of how do you make those characters compelling? On The Walking Dead, that's not an issue. You are trying to do something that is more compelling, more character-driven, something that you expect the audience is going to lean in and want to, yes, be entertained, but want to do some work, that they don't want to be spoon-fed. So there's a type of writing, I think, that just basic good writing ends up more indulged in cable or on cable than on network, where it's really about not confusing or losing the audience.
Right. Well, and I think the freedom, and I love that you're talking about this, because I definitely think the art is on cable. And definitely I think that there are some network shows that I think are I think The Good Wife is probably one of the best written network shows on right now. And so in the subtext in The Good Wife is definitely something that you feel. And versus say Mad Men, where the art of the subtext is incredible as far as theme and symbolism and message, and tying all that together without having to have the dialogues say exactly what you want to say. So I would say with The Walking Dead, I agree with you. In watching I watched the pilot again today, and it was amazing to me to look at what you're talking about as far as the subtext. It almost was like a movie, and so that's fantastic. When you're thinking up scripts now, how is the process different when you start story on cable versus network?
One second before we get to that, if I could just mention about Good Wife.
Okay.
Because it's funny you should say that. I actually just watched the Emmy screen of all 4 episodes that they submitted for The Good Wife.
Right.
What's interesting about The Good Wife, I think it's a terrific show.
Right.
And this is not a show that I would expect me to like.
Right.
What's interesting is I give the producers, the writers, and Juliana Margulies a lot of credit because she's incredibly underwritten.
Right.
There are many scenes in which she has no dialogue.
Right.
And she's just playing things for a look.
I agree.
This goes against what a lot of actors feel they have to do on screen, where they have to drive action, where they have to have all the answers. They have to be the smartest person in the room. She may be the smartest person in the room. I'd have to think about whether or not she is. She probably is.
Right.
But the way that character listens and watches the world around her, and you see the wheels turning,
Right.
I would expect that on cable.
Right.
So the fact that it's done successfully on network, I congratulate that outfit for doing that.
Yeah.
I think it's a terrific show.
Michelle and Robert King, and they have amazing Scott Free works with them. Yeah,
it's a brave choice.
Yeah, I agree.
Do you want to ask again about?
Yes, as far as, so when you look at like your, no, I'm glad that you brought that up about The Good Wife, because I definitely think it is the subtext in it, and what they leave to the actor, and she in particular, is what makes it so incredible. And when you look at cable shows, there is a difference in the writing. So it's interesting for a writer who's been trained in one aspect, certainly you coming from The Shield, versus and going into first Crash and then into the Walking Dead. I know Hawthorne is cable, but not as much as like Crash and The Walking Dead. Right.
Yeah.
So how has your own process changed through that evolution?
Oh, well, I'd have to think about how my own process has changed. I think I've been able to look for the structure in a story. When I start writing a script, I look for the money scenes. What do I want my character? What's a great scene where my character does something cool, drives the action, gets their heart broken, whatever it is, and then how do I build to those moments? So I think that what happens is when I look at scripts that aren't working, it's really mostly a structural issue, because I find writers know what they are looking for, but they don't know how to either take their time with this scene or build to it, or they feel they need setup scenes. You know, I did a panel once with a gentleman who worked for Aaron Sorkin.
Right.
And he said Sorkin's approach was, I don't care about what's coming next. It's not even on his radar. He looks at, I have a 2-page scene. How can I make that scene as interesting as possible?
Right.
And he just burns it out. He just tries to pack everything into that scene, really tries to make that scene. And then he worries about what's coming next. I think sometimes people have the finish line in mind too much.
Right.
And so I try to say, okay, I've been using this.
Right.
How can I make this scene interesting? How can I, whatever I was saving, I'm going to pull it up. I'm going to try to back my characters into a corner where I can't even figure out how they're going to get out of it.
Right.
So instead of having a scene, well, no, I can't have that person say it because it steps on this scene in Act 3.
Right.
I have them say it, and I'll figure out something for Act 3 when I get there.
And then you escalate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you figure it out. And if it gets too big, you can always go back and rewrite it. What's been interesting about the way we're writing The Walking Dead, if I could talk about this in particular, is Frank Darabont is a feature writer-director. He does have a TV credit where he was a staff writer on Young Indiana Jones.
That was before Shawshank.
Yes. And George Lucas was the showrunner.
Yeah, I remember that show.
So we are using their method.
Right.
Where we hired our staff.
Right.
And sat in the room for about 6 weeks.
Right.
Talking through the season. And we had 6 writers on staff, including Frank, myself, Robert Kirkman, Evan Riley, who comes off of Rescue Me, Angela Kang, who was on Terriers, and Scott Gimple, who was on Life after I left, and Flash Forward.
So they're all new. Are they all new to Walking Dead?
Everyone's new to Walking Dead.
Yeah, great.
And David Leslie Johnson, who's a feature writer who just wrote Clash of the Titans 2 and Red Riding Hood.
Great.
So what we did was we talked through the entire season, and we really hit the first 8 episodes hard.
Right.
Okay, we felt like there was a natural arc in those first 8. And we decided this is what's going to be this episode, this is what's going to be in that one, this is the beginning, middle, end of this is where the high point comes, this is the twist, these are the character arcs. And we pitched that material to Gail Ann Hurd and the other producers, and then we pitched it to AMC. Everybody was ecstatic. And then we went off simultaneously and wrote the first 7 scripts.
Thank you for listening. You can hear this interview in its entirety along with dozens more on the Storywise podcast. Just go to iTunes or GenGrisantiConsultancy.com.